This is Mission Control Houston. Good morning, good afternoon. You are looking at a live view from the International Space Station. Cameras pointed towards the pressurized mating adapter on the other side. The SpaceX Crew Dragon. Your screen is Anthony Ibarria and Mike Jensen, the Capcom. You may hear his voice up to the crew as they undergo these final procedures before closing the hatch to the SpaceX Dragon. It's been quite a journey for the SpaceX Dragon, of course, launching on Saturday morning in the wee hours, docking just over 1 day later, and it's been enjoying, I guess, over 4 days at this point aboard the International Space Station. This is sort of the beginning of the end. Right after they close the hatch, they'll begin depressurizing the space between. They actually close a few more hatches. There's the SpaceX Dragon hatch, of course, and then the hatch to the International Docking Adapter and Pressurized Mating Adapter that are connecting SpaceX Dragon to the International Space Station. They'll depressurize the space between those two vehicles, which will begin, which will set up the Crew Dragon for an undocking later tonight and early tomorrow morning, Central and Eastern Time.
Storage lockers, they each have two kind of not quarter turn fasteners, but kind of thumb latches. And I was wondering if the vibrations of return, they might not, if we're not lucky, two of them open on the same box and then the flap comes open. So I thought maybe we could use Kapton tape to tape these down.
And David, we copy and concur. It is a good idea to Kapton tape those down, and you are go.
Thank you.
Capcom Mike Jensen speaking with David St. Jacques aboard the International Space Station, Canadian Space Agency astronaut of Expedition 58. He and NASA's Anne McClain are currently undergoing the final steps to close the hatch to what you're looking at here, the inside of the SpaceX Crew Dragon during its demo-1 mission. The crew have been busy this past week, unloading over 400 pounds of cargo, which was largely composed of crew supplies, things like clothes, food, and other consumables, along with some radiation detectors and cold stowage bags to return some science samples to the ground. Again, Crew Dragon has the capability to return to Earth so that critical science can be analyzed by scientists on the ground. The Dragon has been packed again over this past week with a little more than 300 pounds for that return to Earth. That includes 2 cold storage bags for those research samples. So while docked, the SpaceX Dragon has undergone a series of tests and inspections from both the crew and operators on the ground. Flight controllers tested Dragon's communication and power systems and conducted a survey of the outside of the spacecraft using the Space Station Robotic Manipulator Unit, and inspecting for any micrometeoroid debris and strikes that may hinder any undocking procedures. Even getting a close look at some of the solar cells that are wrapping around, I guess you can call the back of the Dragon's trunk. Crew members also took detailed photos of the Dragon's windows that will be analyzed along with the photos taken before launch, and then some will be taken following splashdown, basically the entire cycle of this vehicle during this particular mission, Demonstration 1. David St. Jacques inside the SpaceX Dragon capsule. This is a view from the capsule itself. There's an anthropomorphic figure there on the left named Ripley. Provide data about what the crew basically will experience during the launch and docking and all the stresses that happen on the human body over this entire mission. Above St. Jacques' head, you can see a hatch. That will be the hatch that will be the one to be closed between the SpaceX Crew Dragon and the International Docking Adapter, where the vehicle is currently attached to the space station. Now, normally during an operation with humans on board, which is of course the intention of this vehicle, this is the demonstration mission to test the capabilities of the vehicle first, hatch closure will be a little bit closer to when the vehicle actually departs. But because this is an uncrewed vehicle, it can happen way ahead of time. Hatch closure scheduled to occur just about 14 hours before the undocking time of 1:31 a.m. Central Time, 11:31 p.m. Pacific, 2:31 Eastern, tomorrow. Once it does actually depart the station, it will be broken up into 3 distinct phases. First, the crew will work to close the hatches, which they're working on right now, between both the Dragon and the space station. Then teams will execute a number of checks and other procedures to prepare the Dragon for undocking. That includes the depressurization between the two vehicles. The hatch closer procedures that you're seeing right now are very similar to the ones you saw just a few days ago for hatch opening, essentially just in reverse. After everything is closed up, the crew will depressurize the vestibule. This is the area between the Dragon that I was talking about and the station, and will be exposed to the vacuum of space following undocking. Once the undocking command is sent, it actually takes about 5 minutes for everything to configure. This includes retracting the 2 umbilicals that have been providing Dragon power and data to the station. Of course, sometime after docking, Dragon relying on station's power through these past couple days to test its integration with the station. Of course, one of the requirements for a successful long-term mission for sending crew aboard the International Space Station. Then once everything is complete, Dragon will actually separate from the docking port on the space station and fly free for the first time in 5 days. Then it will fire its engines and begin flying away from the station. To perform this maneuver, it's actually a little bit different from the Soyuz vehicle, which the crew members have taken up for this mission.
Go for AMS laptop.
6 for go in step 1.1. And this is Huntsville with you, and you have a go. Copy, thank you.
NASA's Anne McClain working through those hatch closure procedures. Expedition 58 flight engineer David St. Jacques you see inside the Crew Dragon undergoing some of those same procedures. Once they are finished with these, the Dragon hatch will close, and it will still remain attached to the International Space Station for about the next 14 hours. Immediately after the hatch closing, undergoing some procedures to depressurize the vestibule in between station and Dragon, get it ready for that undocking 14 hours from now. But once it undocks, it's a little bit from the Soyuz. Soyuz has springs to essentially push it away from the space station. There will actually be an engine that fires. It's an undock burn, one of 2, to get the vehicle away from station. They happen fairly sequentially. First undocking bird actually initiates the physical separation that will be the undocking, or at least complete the undocking of the Crew Dragon to the space station, and then another one will fire just about 6 seconds later, push it further away. Once a safe distance, about 30 seconds after that, there will be the first departure burn, one of many, that will actually fly the Crew Dragon safely away from the International Space Station and begin its descent towards the Earth. That physical separation is planned to occur at 1:31 a.m. Central Time tomorrow morning, 2:31 a.m. Eastern. Then it will spend the next few hours orbiting the Earth until finally splashing down in the Atlantic Ocean at 7:45 a.m. Eastern, or Central, 8:45 a.m. Eastern, again in the Atlantic Ocean just off the coast of Florida. Recovery teams will be just a few kilometers away, ready to move in once they hear about a successful splashdown and recover the vehicle very quickly after splashdown. But for now, Expedition 58 crew members David St. Jacques and Anne McLean of NASA undergoing the final procedures to close the hatch between the Crew Dragon and the International Space Station.
Houston on 2 for grab sample container.
Go on 2 for grab sample container.
If you check here, it's not being stowed with the other ones. It's going in another CTB. The other ones were in 405 and 4030. Serial number 4030. This one is going into 4246. Is that correct? Is that expected?
That is affirmative, correct. 4246.
Okay, go to the store note. Thanks.
David St. Jacques aboard the International Space Station, again working through these procedures to close the hatch. In the meantime, the International Space Station and Crew Dragon still attached, entering into an orbital sunrise. The space station and Crew Dragon flying 255 statute miles over the North Pacific Ocean. Some of the views you're seeing from the inside of the Dragon capsule, a bit blown out now, overexposed due to the brightness, but during the orbital sunrise you were able to see some of the North Pacific as it passed just south of the Gulf of Alaska. Now heading on a southeasterly course towards South America. A little more about Crew Dragon's journey so far. Crew Dragon launched from the Kennedy Space Center on top of a Falcon 9 rocket at 1:49 a.m. Central Time on Saturday, March 2nd. Just over a day later, it docked to the forward end of the International Space Station, where you're seeing it right now, at 4:51 a.m. Central Time, 5:51 Eastern on Sunday, March 3rd. Hatches were opened at 7:07 a.m. Central, 8:07 Eastern. Again, the crew have, once after they opened the hatch, they went about a fairly normal week of scientific investigations, but in the meantime, were able to transfer 400 pounds of cargo from the Crew Dragon to the space station and about 300 pounds back. Many items on board the Crew Dragon. Many of them were consumables such as food. But they had other items such as an orbital flight kit that included some patches and pins flown on the spacecraft, taken in and out. Those will be returned back to Earth along with a few other items. Astronaut David St. Jacques floating in first, and McLean right behind him. And you're seeing Station Commander Oleg Kononenko bring up the rear. What you're seeing now is a short lapse in communication between some of the video and audio feeds of the International Space Station being provided right down here to the International Space Station Flight Control Room. That video and audio being fed through an array of satellites called TDRS. They're tracking and data relay satellites that are geosynchronous to the Earth, flying about 23-ish thousand miles right overhead in a way that covers most of the Earth and provides pretty consistent data and communication from the International Space Station down here to the ground. Of course, a shared resource and small gaps in between as we undergo these procedures for hatch closing. Inside here, all of the positions of the room are looking at various parts of the International Space Station. Every system you can think of is managed from here. You have flight controllers that are managing basically the environmental and life support systems, some looking at thermal, some actually positioning the International Space Station itself, another to figure out where it's going and tracking its trajectory over time. You have officers here that are looking specifically at the Crew Dragon and its integration with the International Space Station, making sure it's okay, relaying that information to SpaceX flight control teams in Hawthorne, California. All teams here are led by the flight director today during this shift of Orbit 2. That's the second of 3 shifts that are staffing this room 24 hours a day. Anthony Varia, you're seeing there at the forward end of the screen. As the Expedition 58 crew undergoes these final procedures for hatch closure, you'll hear Mike Jensen right behind him. He is the Capcom for today, relaying some of the information from all of the controllers here through Mike Jensen, the Capcom, up to the crew members of Expedition 58. Again, a short lapse in communications here, but once we regain them, we should have solid communications through the rest of the hatch closing and what the flight teams here refer to as egress procedures. Basically, the final moments before they close the hatch and leave the inside of the Crew Dragon for good before it finally undocks. Again, that undocking time is scheduled for about 14 hours from now, 1:31 a.m. Central Time, 2:31 Eastern. Though this is a human-rated vehicle, no humans are on it, which is why we are closing the hatches a little bit early. But of course, when SpaceX Dragon brings humans aboard, we expect that hatch closure to be there for a few times. No need to have the astronauts sitting in place for 14 hours. Of course, this is a historic moment, capturing the final moments of the astronauts inside the Crew Dragon. You're seeing David St. Jacques on the left, in the middle, NASA's Anne McClain, and on the right, the commander of Expedition 58, Oleg Kononenko of Roscosmos. In the middle is the zero-G indicator that was actually flown up on the Crew Dragon after launch and entering into an orbit on its way to the International Space Station. The zero-G indicator, which they are holding now, actually floated up, basically indicating when they were in zero-G or microgravity environment and ready to begin its next steps towards flying towards the International Space Station. That zero-G indicator is scheduled to remain on board the International Space Station while the Crew Dragon will depart tomorrow morning. Commander Oleg Kononenko exiting the vehicle, returning to the International Space Station. David St. Jacques and Anne McLean enjoying these final moments before they close the hatch to the vehicle, where it will remain docked to the International Space Station for the next 14 hours until undocking tomorrow morning, Central and Eastern Time. Anne McLean II outside the vehicle, David St. Jacques bringing up the rear. He the first crew member to enter Crew Dragon aboard the space station. David St. Jacques initiating the command to officially close the hatch of the SpaceX Crew Dragon. This is the beginning of the end for the Crew Dragon on its demo-1 mission. And with that, the hatch of the SpaceX Crew Dragon is closed. Hatch closed at 11:39 a.m. Central Time, 11:39 p.m. Eastern. The space station at the time was 253 statute miles over the Pacific Ocean, just west off the coast of Mexico.
Houston Station, Dragon hatch closed, 17:39 GMT.
Copy. Dragon hatch close, 17:39.
So you heard it confirmed from Davis St. Jacques aboard the International Space Station, the first crew member to enter Dragon and the last to exit on its mission, its Demonstration 1 mission aboard the International Space Station. He called it in Greenwich Mean Time, of course, the time that they are operating aboard the International Space Station. We'll call it 11:39 a.m. Central, 12:39 p.m. Eastern Time. Hatches closed to the Crew Dragon, the beginning of the end of its mission on board the International Space Station, and the conclusion of its Demonstration 1 mission, set to begin tomorrow morning. Some final pictures taken inside the Crew Dragon and, of course, on the outside. A little window peeking in, and some of the sunlight from the Earth below still coming in through the windows of the SpaceX Crew Dragon as it flies 253 statute miles over the Pacific. Again, that time, 11:39 a.m. Central Time, 12:39 p.m. Pacific, or Eastern. Just under 14 hours from now, the Dragon is scheduled to undock from the International Space Station. That's scheduled actual physical separation at 1:31 a.m. Central Time, 2:31 a.m. Eastern. So again, after that undocking command is sent, just under 14 hours from now, there will be an actual burn that occurs to physically separate the Dragon from the International Space Station, a series of burns followed by a departure burn, one of many that will actually get the Crew Dragon safely away from the International Space Station, outside the keep-out sphere, outside the approach ellipsoid. These are sort of imaginary lines we draw around the International Space Station, rules that help us to identify safety margins and operational procedures. And then the Crew Dragon will begin its descent towards the Earth, scheduled to splash down in the Atlantic Ocean on tomorrow morning, scheduled for 7:45 a.m. Central, 8:45 a.m. Eastern. You're looking at the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Teams here looking at some of the systems aboard the International Space Station and working through the procedures with the crew aboard the International Space Station to close a series of hatches. Of course, the Crew Dragon hatch was closed at 11:39 a.m. Central Time, 11:39 p.m. Eastern. That is one of several hatches that is to be closed throughout these procedures that the astronauts will continue to conduct throughout the day. getting ready for an undocking tomorrow morning, where their main priority will be monitoring the procedure. The Dragon hatch is docked. There are a few hatches in between the Dragon hatch and the inside of the International Space Station. The Dragon itself is docked to the International Docking Adapter. That is attached to the front of the Pressurized Mating Adapter, and those two components are on the very front of the International Space Station. After the hatch is closed between the Dragon and the International Docking Adapter, David St. Jacques working to close the hatch from the Pressurized Mating Adapter to the International Docking Adapter. That's that small component you see on the other side of the hatch that David St. Jacques is working on now. After working through these procedures, he's expected to close the hatch to the pressurized mating adapter in between the pressurized mating adapter and the station itself in the Node 2 Harmony vehicle, or module of the International Space Station, Node 2 being where some of the sleeping quarters of the International Space Station are. For those tuning in, you're looking at a live view from the International Space Station into the pressurized mating adapter and the International Docking Adapter, where you see a white circular hatch. That is SpaceX's Crew Dragon. The hatch was closed just a few minutes ago at 11:39 a.m. Central, 12:39 p.m. Eastern.
Two.
David, we've been watching over your shoulder and also noticed in the vestibule area that the IMV duct restraint, which is in Figure 1, it's a bit of Velcro and cloth that holds the duct in place, is a little bit loose, and they're concerned about it maybe drifting into something and catching something. Wondering if you can get in there and find a way to kind of tighten it down a bit more, or get it sunk up against the outer hole a bit or closely.
Yeah, I see exactly what you mean.
This is Mission Control Houston. You were just hearing the ground teams here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room communicating with David St. Jacques aboard the International Space Station as he undergoes the procedures to close the hatch between the International Docking Adapter and the Pressurized Mating Adapter. This is the second hatch in between that hatch that you see right at the back of the screen there. The white circular hatch, that's the hatch to the Crew Dragon, closed just moments ago at 11:39 a.m. Central. Teams here helping him to troubleshoot some of the techniques that are needed to successfully close the hatch. One of the many procedures that follow the hatch closure of Crew Dragon, essentially getting everything set up for a successful undocking tomorrow morning. That undocking time scheduled at 1:31 a.m. Central, 2:31 a.m. Eastern.
Station Houston on 2 for David. No response required. OSO is happy with what they're seeing in the video. Copy, thumb.
This is Mission Control Houston. You heard Capcom Mike Jensen report to David St-Jacques. Everything's looking good from the OSO console. One of the many flight controllers here. This flight controller looks over, basically manages some of the issues, some of the system issues that may happen aboard the International Space Station, identifies them and resolves them. Everything's looking good though as we undergo the closure of the second hatch. First hatch to Dragon closed at 11:39 a.m. Central. That hatch was the hatch of the Crew Dragon itself, in between the Crew Dragon and the International Docking Adapter. This hatch you're seeing now is a hatch between the International Docking Adapter and the Pressurized Mating Adapter, where David St-Jacques is currently working now.
Still, station on 2 for AMS laptop. We're with you, Ann. I have looked at this 10 or 11 times to make sure this is accurate, but I'm at Columbus Aft 1, Locker 7. I'm in step 2.5, and I'm looking at the power J1 connection, and I'm looking at the PS28 cable 5 foot. The Locker 7 is a large connector with 6 prongs, and the PS28 5 foot cable is a smaller 4-prong connection.
We copy all of that information. Give us just a couple minutes to think about it.
Copy.
This is Mission Control Houston. One final photographic survey from David St. Jacques inside the International Docking Adapter. Taking photos in high resolution, making sure there's no foreign objects or any abnormalities, as once he closes the hatch, it will remain closed because the vestibule in between where he was taking the photos, that's the International Docking Adapter, will be depressurized to commence the successful undocking of SpaceX Crew Dragon from the International Space Station later tomorrow morning.
On 2 for hatch surface cleaning.
Go for hatch surface cleaning.
Well, the procedure refers to cleaning pads. What should I understand by that? Is that the just dry wipes, or I assume not the disinfectant wipes?
And David, we are double checking.
I'm referring to step 6.2.
Copy, 6.2.
Station Huntsville on 2 for Ann and AMS.
Go ahead on 2.
We are looking at some pictures down here, going down some rabbit holes, trying to get you an answer. But for now, go ahead and take a 5-minute break if you'd like, because we think it's going to take just a little while.
Okay, no worries.
Station Houston on 2 for David.
He is listening.
All right, answering his question about the hatch seal, we've had a little bit of a meeting of the minds and have agreed we would like to use the multi-purpose dry wipes as are used in the 1.1.521 U.S. hatch seal inspection that is referenced in SEP 7.2.
Bill?
And Station Houston on 2 for Ann, just a reminder, we're coming close to the point we'll need the desiccant steps.
Those are complete.
Copy, desiccant complete.
This is Mission Control Houston. You're looking at a live view from the International Space Station, a camera looking into the pressurized mating adapter and the International Docking Adapter. At the end of that is a circular structure that is the hatch to the SpaceX Crew Dragon. Hatch was closed at 11:39 a.m. Central Time, 11:39 p.m. Eastern. Right now, Canadian Space Agency astronaut David St. Jacques working through procedures to close the hatch that you see at the forward end of your screen. There's a series of hatches that separate the Dragon itself from the first module, I guess, of the International Space Station. There's the hatch of the Dragon itself that connects to the International Docking Adapter. Then the hatch that you're seeing right there is the International Docking Adapter, which allows Dragon to be docked to the International Space Station, and the Pressurized Mating Adapter, which is where the Space Shuttle used to dock to. That hatch will be closed, and lastly, he'll close the hatch between the Pressurized Mating Adapter and the Node 2 Harmony module. This is the module of the International Space Station at the very forward end, and essentially a node, which means it has 6 ports to connect various either modules or other fixtures of the International Space Station, and it's also the area where the crew sleeps. The hatches are closed just about 14 hours in advance of the undocking. Of course, this is a demonstration mission of a crew vehicle, but there are no crew that were on board during this demonstration mission, really just to test the vehicle itself and its integration with the International Space Station. Because of that, hatches were closed way ahead of time, for about 14 hours. But in the instance that the Dragon were carrying humans aboard the International Space Station, hatches will be closed a little bit closer to the actual time of undocking. The time of undocking for this vehicle scheduled for tomorrow morning, 1:31 a.m. Central Time, 1:31 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. Recently, you may have heard the Capcom here in Mission Control Houston, Mike Jensen, refer some procedures about wiping the hatch before closing it, deciding on which type of wipe to use. These are just some of the normal procedures for closing the hatch. This one being referred to normal, what's called USOS procedures. That means United States and other partner countries. Russian docking fixtures have a little bit of separate procedures. This is Mission Control Houston. David St. Jacques using dry wipes to basically clean the hatches of where the international docking adapter meets the pressurized mating adapter, one of a series of hatches that'll be closed throughout these procedures now that the hatch to the Dragon itself, the SpaceX Crew Dragon, has been closed.
All right, Ann, I think we do actually just about have good words for you, so I'm going to go ahead and give you what I got. First of all, this was our mistake, so we apologize for that. We're actually missing a cable that needs to go between that PS28 cable and the rack. And so the cable that we need you to grab is at PM1. Port 1 rack bay, and it's going to be in HAP CTB 4073, and that CTB is labeled as 28 volt number 1. And then the serial number of the cable you need is 1003, and we're expecting it to be in a Ziploc bag.
Okay, I will run grab it.
All righty, thank you, Ann, and sorry about that mistake.
No worries.
Station Houston on 2 for David. We do see the PMA hatch closed. We were noticing in the video that there are some loose threads on the closeout covers from the...
This is Mission Control Houston. You just witnessed the hatch to the pressurized mating adapter being closed. That was at 12:12 p.m. Central Time, 1:12 p.m. Eastern. Again, the hatch to the Dragon itself was closed at 11:39 a.m. Central Time, 11:39 p.m. Eastern. This is the beginning of the end for Crew Dragon's stay on board the International Space Station. Just less than 14 hours from now, it's scheduled to be undocked. Actually, closer to 13 at this point. Closer to 13 hours from now, looking at 1:31 a.m. Central Time, 2:31 a.m. Eastern for that undocking time. To tune into our live coverage and witness that event, we'll go live at 1 a.m. Central, 2 a.m. Eastern. Begin our coverage for the actual undocking of Crew Dragon from the International Space Station. We'll take a break and come back on and show you splashdown coverage. That splashdown time, we're aiming for 7:45 a.m. Central, 8:45 a.m. Eastern. We're going to take a break before we get back to the final chapters of the SpaceX Crew Dragon on its Demonstration 1 mission. This is Mission Control Houston.